on page Membase, I'm in base, we're on page 42b. We've been learning about a few different topics were mentioned in the Mishnah. There's wine before a meal, pre-meal wine, post-meal wine, and then there's wine during the meal. And we mentioned the pre-meal wine exempts the post-meal wine, but we did have a question that if a person didn't drink the pre-meal wine, recite a bracha on the pre-meal wine, would the wine in the meal, would that exempt the post-meal wine? Or maybe that they're two separate wines, possibly the wine during the meal could be looked at as wine that's meant to help the digestion, and the wine after the meal is more of a celebratory wine, and possibly it wouldn't be exempted. And the Gemara mentioned that there's machlokes about it. We also talked about the blessing on the parperes, which is like this side dish, is that going to be exempted when you have the challah. Does the challah exempt the side dish or not? And the Mishnah said that it does. It exempts this parperes. And there is somewhat of a discussion in Rashi's opinion, because we know that Rashi holds that generally the thing that's exempted with the bread is something that you're eating the bread with, a condiment for the bread. But if it's just a side dish, Rashi seemed to have a very strict view. It's not brought in Shulchan Aruch, but Rashi seemed to have a more strict view that maybe you would need to recite its own bracha. Only things that are eaten with bread don't get their own bracha, but something eaten on the side maybe would get its own bracha, different than all the other commentaries. And so someone explained this, Rashi. The truth is, Rashi himself seems to explain this in one of his other books, that he explains that he's talking about here, where the parperes, this side dish, was there when you recited the Hamoitzi blessing. So therefore, it's included in the Hamoitzi blessing because it was there in front of you. So when you said the Hamoitzi, you were basically including this, even though it might not be eaten on the bread as a spread for the bread, but it's included. And so anyway, that's the way Rashi learns. Taisus doesn't have an issue with it because it's included, it's there, it's part of the meal, even if it's not eaten with the bread. And we're dealing with if it was like a dessert, that would be another story. But we're dealing with this side dish that's part of the meal, so it's not an issue. Now, then we got involved with dealing with the concept of heseba, leaning. And in order to be mitzi for the brachas of hanenin, for brachas of benefit, of pleasure, we mentioned that there needs to be some type of a joining together that makes you part of the group. It makes it into a group, I should say, makes the group into a group setting, a communal setting. And in the time of the Mishnah, that was by heseba. When they would sit together, that would actually make them into a group eating. And one person could be mitzi everyone else, whether for the original bracha on the bread, hamitzi, or for the grace after meal as well. There would also be the option of one person benching and everyone else answering amen, which in fact was preferable. That was the ideal way of doing things. And the simple understanding of why would they want to have one person be mitzi everyone else? Why would one person exempt everyone else? Well, the simple answer to that is that it's beroiv am hadras melech. When there's a large group, it gives more honor to the king. You know, when you have a bad turnout, it doesn't look so good. But if you have a nice turnout, it looks very nice. So if you have everyone fulfilling their mitzvah together, it seems it brings more honor to Hashem. So that's the logic. That would be the reason. Again, it doesn't apply in every scenario, But where it could apply, that's possibly the understanding of why it's there is an advantage of having one person say the bracha and have everyone else be yotzei. I did also mention that when we do grace after meal, we don't do this anymore. Have one person say the grace and everyone else fulfill the mitzvah with saying amen. And I mentioned the reason because we don't concentrate as well as they used to concentrate. And that's even before cell phones and WhatsApps and text messages. Now with these things, it makes it even worse. Our attention span is even less than in the time of than the last last few centuries. And so things have gotten even worse now. But the idea is that if we were able to concentrate better and listening to someone else say the bracha, we would be able to concentrate. Then maybe we still would be having one person recite the grace after meal and everyone would say amen. And again, I mentioned that this applies only for a zimun if there's 3 men that are saying the grace after meal. But if you only have 2 people, then it wouldn't apply for grace after meal for one person to exempt the other one. It only applies if you have that zimun, which is that communal responses for the benching. The bracha before the meal, one person could be mitzi someone else with the hamitzi. That could be done even without 3, even without the zimun concept. But the bracha after the meal, there is that qualification that it needs to have that. I did want to mention that the source of the benching with a group, interestingly enough, is in the book of Shmuel Aleph. That one person says the bracha, not benching, I should say, but one person reciting a bracha and having everyone else in mind. It's the Vilna Gaon brings the source from Shmuel Aleph. What's the source? If you remember, Shmuel was when Shaul was heading to find Shmuel. So they said that Shmuel is heading to some event where they're going to have a zevach, a korban, a sacrifice. They're going to eat from the sacrifice, this korban shlomim. And they said, behold, he is just ahead of you. Hurry now, for he came to the city today. For the people are bringing a feast offering today at the high place, at the Bama. As you enter the city, you will find him before he ascends to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat before he comes. Why? Since he blesses the offering, only afterwards do the invited guests eat. So he's going to recite the bracha, and only afterwards they're going to eat. So this seems to be a hint to the fact that he would say the bracha, and they would just say amen. They weren't going to say the bracha. They're waiting for him to say the bracha, and afterwards they will eat. It doesn't say afterwards they will say the bracha. It says afterwards they will eat. So this is in chapter 9 of Shmuel Aleph. And so now what bracha are we talking about here? We're talking about the bracha on the eating the sacrificial meats. The bracha is asher kedeshanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu lechol hazevach, that he commanded us to eat the zevach, to eat from the korban. So he's going to recite the bracha. It seems like they are just going to say amen, be able to have from the sacrifice. 1 second, I got to mute everyone. And I know we have a few questions. I just wanted to finish that train of thought. So this is seems to be one of the sources of one person reciting the bracha and everyone just replying amen. Let's see, Susan, you had a question.
I was going to ask you that I watch a Friday night service every Friday night, and is my blessings any less accepted?
Well, you're not really allowed to watch anything on Shabbos. Is it before Shabbos begins?
It's before Shabbos begins.
So all you're doing is enjoying
So I'm not doing anything. Nice, in other words, I'm not really making
right,
showing homage to Hashem. I'm not,
Well, what you're doing is watching a nice show.
but I'm,
That's all you're doing. That's not a prayer. You're not fulfilling your obligation of prayers.
and when I say
Because
the
if you
prayers,
would,
when I say the prayers that they're saying, I'm not
no,
fulfilling.
that's a big problem because it's not night yet. And if it was night, you wouldn't be allowed to turn on your TV, your video, whatever you're watching it on, your computer. So if it's night already, then you can't watch it. If it's not night, then they're reciting the blessings too early.
Okay.
And so it's a nice show. You might enjoy it. You might learn something. I don't know if it's but it might be enjoyable music, but it wouldn't seem to be. The only thing is that there is a concept of accepting early Shabbos. So accepting early Shabbos would mean that maybe they're accepting Shabbos a little earlier than usual, and then it's not really Shabbos. So if it's not really Shabbos and you're watching it, it's not such a problem. The only thing is you're not fulfilling your obligation, because once you want to accept Shabbos, then you shouldn't be watching it. You get what I'm saying? So if you're watching it,
I light my candles at the proper time.
right?
What I'm
So
saying
you're not
to
accepting
you,
Shabbos.
what I'm
So
saying to you is that I am participating, listening to the blessings.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
listening-
this is not the thing. Listening to those blessings, it's either being done in a fraudulent way, meaning they're not really supposed to be doing it that way. So they're doing things wrong. They're fooling their congregation either because it's too early. So they're tricking their congregation. Maybe for whatever reason they're doing it, they think they're doing a nice thing, but it's really not the real thing. So
Not
they're saying
acceptable
God's
is what
name.
you're saying.
It sounds like they're saying God's name in vain. Is it like 2 or 3
see.
o'clock in the afternoon? When is it? What time is it?
It's all different times.
Uh-huh.
It's from a temple in New York City.
Right. Well, listen, people do whatever they want, unfortunately. And they might be saying God's name in vain because they're doing it too early, probably. Now, unless they're not saying God's name, like they might say Baruch Atah Hashem, and they're doing that maybe to help just to make people have a good time, like people do in nursing homes. You know, if you go to a nursing home, you're not going to actually do the real service. You do a mock service, a fake service just to give them a good time, which is a nice thing. And you tell them straight out, this is not the real thing. It's like they do in schools for the little children. They have a Shabbos at noontime. They'll have a little Shabbos thing, and they'll sing the Shalom Aleichem, and one of the kids will say the blessing on the grape juice, and the girl will maybe
it's an instructive.
It's a nice thing to do. It's a play. It's a mock. It's a pre-Shabbos thing. But they don't do God's. They won't say
accept that. You're saying that
no. That's not. It's not meant to be accepted by God. That's meant to be a nice thing for the children. It's meant to be a nice thing for the nursing home. They have a good time. Right. You're doing something nice, but that's not meant to fulfill. You can't fulfill eating matzah before the time to eat matzah. You can't fulfill Shabbos on a Friday. You have to fulfill Shabbos.
Like I said, I light my own candles at the proper time.
Right. So you're fulfilling the candle lighting at your time. You're not fulfilling the prayers. You are having a good time watching the prayers, but you're not fulfilling the obligation of prayers. They might be sinning when they're doing it. They might not. I don't know. I didn't watch what they're doing. So I don't know what they're doing. They might be sinning. You're having a good time, which is fine. It's nice, but just keep that in mind that that's not fulfillment of the prayers. Now, you're not really obligated to pray the full service. Women don't generally pray the night service. The accepting the Shabbos, women are not, even men are not obligated really to do that. We've accepted it. Seems like the men have accepted it, but it's an innovation of the Kabbalists. It's not written in Shulchan Aruch to have to say Kabbalat Shabbat. That you have to recite the full prayers of the Friday. So anyway, women are not really obligated in the prayers. Some women do them, which is very nice, and they've accepted to do them. But so you don't have to feel you're missing anything without participating in such a service either. Okay, So does that gives you a
Yeah,
bigger,
a
bigger
better
picture now?
understanding. Yeah,
Yeah.
better understanding.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ben,
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that now I understand better why Shmuel was so mad on Shaul that started the Zevach before he got there. Because they ate without the blessing of Shmuel.
I don't know if
No,
they
without the blessing of Shmuel.
Yeah, no, but I don't know if they reached that stage of eating from it. He just started, and all of a sudden, Shmuel popped in. So I don't know if they actually said the blessing on the eating yet. It doesn't say. I'd have to look it up, but I don't think that he actually started eating from the sacrifice. I think he just started preparing it too early.
He said you did the Zevach before I came.
Right. But doesn't mean eating from it. We'll have to look it up. It's not on my fingertips.
But it's more understood why he's mad, because he should be the one to say the blessing for the eating.
But I'll have to look it up. So remind me if I don't get back to you on that. So that's one thing. Another thing, interesting thing that we see here is that the Gemara here says on 42b, the Gemara said that Rabbi Bar Bachana said this, and then Rabbi Yochanan and the other rabbis seem to say it, that what we're dealing with regard to the wine is a meal that people are koveya su'uda on wine. People establish the meal on wine. And that applies on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, and then the Gemara mentioned two other examples of having a meal that's established on wine, when you say the bracha on 1 cup of wine before the meal, it even covers the wine after the meal, and that's when a person bloodlets, which was something that was done for health reasons, and another example was when a person went to the bathhouse. So in any event, what we see is that this concept of having a lot of wine during the meal is a person is koveya sud on wine for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Other times of the year or of the week, it's not Shabbos, it's not the holidays. You're drinking wine at a meal. You have 1 cup. That was, maybe you did it for, you wanted to get the special benefits of, you don't want, they say wine helps against heart disease. So you have your 1 cup of wine. You're in France, they give you the 1 cup of wine. You fulfilled your thing, and that's it. Now you want to have another cup of wine, make a new bracha, because you're not planning on officially having another cup of wine. That you had your 1 cup of wine, and that's the norm, and that's what they pour you. And now you want to have another cup, you got to recite another bracha. Mevarich al kol kois v'kois. Because now you're sort of changing your mind. You're deciding now, oh, you know what? Let me have another cup of wine. So you change initially you planned on that 1 cup, and now you're changing your mind. So therefore, you would need a bracha. I would just want to mention to you, there's a famous statement in the Rambam that many people question. The Rambam in chapter 30, the laws of Shabbos, the Rambam says that a person's obligated to have 3 meals on Shabbos: the night, the morning, and the afternoon. And you should be careful in these 3 meals. You shouldn't have less than them. And even a poor person who gets charity money should eat the 3 meals. If a person can't handle 3 meals because he's sick, that's okay, he's exempt. But, and then the Rambam says this statement, and you should be establish all 3 meals on wine. This is what the Rambam says. You should establish them on wine, and you should cut 2 full loaves. You should have 2 full loaves. In Biboitseya, you break bread on 2 full loaves, and also on Yom Tov. Now, what it means on Yom Tov is that Yom Tov also you should have 2 full loaves. There are 2 things that are surprising here. One is that it sounds like you're supposed to make kiddush on the 3rd meal of Shabbos, because you establish the meal on wine on all 3 meals. Sounds like all 3 meals you need to have Kiddush. And that's the way the Tur learns the Rambam. That the Rambam holds not only Friday night Kiddush, not only Shabbos day Kiddush, but even Shalashudis, the third meal on Shabbos, you should have Kiddush. You should make like a Kiddush, a very priyagofen, and have wine. Establish the meal on wine. You should have a cup of wine before the third meal. And the commentaries deal with that no one else seems to hold that. That's a very unique, this is a surprising thing that the Rambam is saying. And it seems based on our Gemara, because our Gemara here on page 42b is saying that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, a person is koivea sud on wine. That means all meals are supposed to have established on wine. Now, others learn the Rambam to mean differently. It doesn't mean that you have to make Kiddush, but it means that the meal should include wine. That wine should be a part of the meal. So that's another way of learning. And that's the other surprising thing is when he says that the same thing applies to holidays. Does he mean on holidays you need to have 3 meals? Or does he mean that on holidays you need to have 2 loaves? So if he says you have to have 3 meals, that's also surprising because no one else seems to hold that way. That's a surprising law. But normally we say on Yom Tov you only need 2 meals. Shabbos you have to have 3 meals. On Yom Tov, on holidays, you only have 2 meals. So the other way of learning means that he's only referring to the 2 loaves, that on each of the meals you should have 2 loaves of bread to make lechem mishnah, which we're familiar with. We always do that on our Shabbos meals and Yom Tov meals, but we don't have 3 meals on Yom Tov. So this Rambam seems to be connected to this Gemara. Let me mute everyone. This Rambam seems to be connected to this Gemara about being Kavea Suuda, establishing your meal on wine. And there is discussion if the Rambam holds you're supposed to make Kiddush on Shalashudis. For those that like wine, they like this class probably today. A new obligation now to make Kiddush on Shalashudis. Yes, Ben.
Do you need 2 challahs 3 times?
Well, you don't have to cut both. You could cut 1 challah at each meal, so you need 4 challahs. Two challahs Friday night. Only eat one of them, and then the next day you use one of the last night's challahs with the 1 challah with a new challah, and then for the third meal you have 2 challahs. So you have altogether 4 challahs. You're all set. Now, not everyone holds you need to wash for the third meal. There are leniencies about washing during the third meal that you could get away with a fruit or mezainis or other options for the third meal of Shabbos. There are leniencies. I rely on those leniencies.
I can't eat that many challahs in one weekend.
You don't have to finish the challahs. You're not supposed to eat the whole challah.
Oh, okay.
You have to eat you should eat the size of an egg. Maybe a drop more, and then you're all set. What? The size of an egg of challah. That's not a whole challah. A little over a size of an egg, and you fulfilled your mitzvah of Shabbos. Okay. But okay. So in any event, getting back to the Gemara here. So we had the discussion of reciting a bracha on each cup, and the story with Abaye that it was Yantiv, and Abaye recited a bracha on every single cup, and so he explained that I normally don't have wine, and we said one of the explanations is he was poor, and this was something special. He decided to have another cup, so he was nimlach. He changed his mind, therefore he recited a bracha on each cup. Then we mentioned the question of having wine during a meal. Will that exempt the wine that's after the meal? And what that means is, if you had wine before the meal, then for sure it's going to exempt wine during the meal and after the meal. That there's no question about. But if you didn't have wine before the meal, for example, you didn't have Kiddush. You heard Kiddush, but you didn't drink from the wine. You heard Kiddush and you had a meal right afterwards. And now, during the meal, you're going to recite a bracha on wine because you're going to have wine. Now, if you're going to recite a bracha on wine, that bracha, will that cover the wine that's at the end of the meal? Will that cover the wine at the end of the meal? And that's what the Gemara asks. And the Gemara tries to bring a proof. Then the Gemara says it's not a proof. So the conclusion is that there's an argument. Rav says poiter. Rav Kana says it's not poiter. Rav says that initially Rav said that it exempts the wine later. Rav Shesha says it doesn't. Rav Nachman says it does. Rav Huna, the students of Rav says it doesn't. So it seems, and we explained that it seems like Rav changed his mind later. Now, then the Gemara spoke about the opinion of Beis Shammai, which is very vague, and the Gemara ends off with a teku. And this teku, it's interesting because here, teku means we're going to have to ask Elijah. But the thing is that when Mashiach comes, we have Tchias HaMesim, we don't have to ask Elijah. We could ask Beis Shammai. Teku normally would be, if no one else you could ask, you ask Elijah the prophet. Elijah is going to clarify. Here, we don't know what Beis Shammai said. It's unclear what Beis Shammai said. It's not about, we can't figure out what the law is. We don't know what they said. So when Mashiach comes, why don't we just ask Beis Shammai? Instead, we're asking, Teku means we ask Elijah. So the answer, I guess, is that Elijah comes before Beis Shammai is resurrected, and which is there is discussion about this. Tzaddikim, the righteous, get up before the revelations. There is discussion about this. If the righteous are going to have, there are going to be different times for the resurrection of the dead, and if the righteous get up before the revelation of Mashiach, which means like at an earlier stage, then maybe we could ask Beis Shammai what they held. And the question is, why does it say Teku, which would mean Tishbi Yitaretz, that Elijah is going to answer this question? Seemingly we should be able to ask Beis Shammai what they held, and they would be able to answer the question. But the only thing is that maybe by the time when they get resurrected, they might change their opinion. So maybe it won't be clear to them what their original view was. Maybe in heaven they're going to have different views. So maybe that's why only Elijah will know what the original view of Beis Shammai was. I don't know. I'm just throwing a thought there. So we're up to the next piece here, and it's I see Moshe wants to say something. Moshe?
Yes. Well, Beis Shammai is the more machmir of the Rebbeim, and you would think that he would get predilection as to the decision making under the circumstances. Instead of turning to Elijah, if they can't come to a decision, then it leads to the more machmir position, doesn't it?
We don't have a question. We don't have a question of what the law is. We have a question of simply what Beis Shammai said. What was the meaning of their statement? So we just need them to explain. If there was a question of law, then we would, maybe need Elijah to clarify. Here we're not looking. It's not a question of law. Here it's just a question of what was Beis Shammai saying in the Mishnah. What was their statement? So let's just ask Beis Shammai. Okay. So the next Gemara says, they were sitting all of them, and this is the Mishnah said this. Each one recites their own bracha, but if they're hesebu, if they're leaning, then one person will recite for everyone. So the Gemara says hesebu in like hesebu like. If they're leaning, they're relaxing, they're reclining, then one person can recite the bracha for everyone. But if not, you can't. V'reminhu, and the people of the yeshiva asked the contradiction from a brisa. They said asara. There were 10 people shahayu holchin badera that were going on the way. Even if they're all eating from the same loaf of bread, each one has to recite a bracha himself. Yashvu lechol, if they sit down to eat, even if each one eats his own loaf, now everyone can recite a bracha. One person can recite a bracha for everyone. So what do we see here? That it's all about sitting together. It doesn't have to do with reclining. Katani yashvu. As long as they sit down, one person can have in mind everyone. Even if they're not reclining. Rav Yitzchok says, to answer this question, that they said, let us go and eat the bread in that place, which means that they established a place with speech. They verbalized a plan, and that they're going to sit together. They prepared themselves to sit together to eat. That is what makes this a kvius. It makes it an established meal of unity, of uniting this group. And in such a way, everyone would agree that one person can recite the bracha for everyone. But if they just happen to sit down in one place, that is not called a kvius. They would need to be reclining. That would be a kvius. And we're going to stop here, I guess, because my time is up.